Hey guys, this is Chapter 3, Section 3, Aquatic Ecosystems. Our essential questions, there are 3 of them. What are the major abiotic factors that determine the aquatic ecosystems? What are the transitional aquatic ecosystems and why are they important? And what are the zones of marine ecosystems? Hopefully by the end of the video you can answer all 3 of those questions. Here are the vocabulary. Take a moment, pause the video, write those down in your notes somewhere near the notes packet that you got in class today. Water on Earth. Aquatic environments are divided into 2 categories, freshwater and marine. Freshwater obviously is freshwater. It has no salt. It's what we have around here. Marine ecosystems are saltwater ecosystems. They are oceans and seas, bodies of water that contain salt. Only about 2.5% of the water on Earth is fresh water. We have some charts down here. This is showing the total water on Earth. This little sliver right here is the amount of fresh water. Then we have another pie chart showing that amount of fresh water as a whole. About 70% is stored in glaciers, about 31% is in groundwater, and only about 0.3% can be found in rivers and lakes. Freshwater ecosystems, rivers and streams. Water in rivers and streams flow in one direction. The slope of the landscape determines the direction and the speed of the water. Water flows downhill. Okay, gravity is pulling it down. So if it starts up here on a mountain, it's going to flow downward. And the steepness of the mountain determines how fast it goes. If it's a very steep incline, the water is going to move much more quickly. The water up here on top of the mountain is going to be moving very quickly. As the mountain becomes less steep, the river will move much more slowly. And by the time that it gets down here to the sea, this estuary region right here, the water is very slow moving. Sediment is the material that is deposited by water, wind, or glaciers. So it is solid particles that are dropped by either water, wind, or glaciers. Interactions between land and water result in differences in erosion, nutrient availability, and species composition, and diversity along the course of the water. In fast-moving water, there is less sediment because there's more energy keeping that sediment suspended, keeping it mixed up in the water. In fast-moving water, there is also fewer species of animals living there. In slow-moving water, the sediment doesn't have as much energy, it's not moving as quickly, so it will settle to the bottom as mud, silt, or sand, depending on what it is made out of. Slow-moving water supports a diversity of plant and animal species because they're not constantly being churned about. They're not being bounced through the water at a very high rate of speed. Freshwater ecosystems, lakes and ponds. An inland body of standing water is called a lake or a pond. The temperature of lakes and ponds varies with the seasons. Turnover in lake water circulates nutrients and oxygen between water depth. So you'll see that there is a current in these bodies of water. Okay, and that is what churns up nutrients from the bottom of the lake and moves them to the top. Lakes and ponds are divided into 3 zones based upon the amount of sunlight that penetrates the water. The littoral zone is the closest to shore. It is shallow and sunlight reaches all the way to the bottom. The littoral zone is a highly productive area with lots of producers, so lots of plants growing there because they are able to get sunlight to create their own food. The limetic zone is an open water area that is well lit. Production is dominated by phytoplankton, which are free-floating autotrophs. So they're plants that just kind of hang out in the water like algae. And this is home to many freshwater fish species. So you'll see that the limit zone is this right here, where we can find the fish. The profundal zone is the deepest part of the lake or pond, and very little light penetrates through the limit layer to this profundal zone. It's colder, and there is less oxygen to be found there. Transitional aquatic ecosystems. Wetlands, areas of land such as marshes, swamps, and bogs that are saturated with water that support aquatic plants are called wetlands or wetlands. They have a high species diversity. There's lots of different organisms that live there. Lots of fish, lots of birds, lots of reptiles. So lots and lots of animals live in wetlands. Estuaries. An estuary is where fresh water from a stream or a river meets salt water from the ocean. Estuaries can support a variety of habitats, such as mangrove forest or salt marshes. Marine ecosystems. Intertidal zone. An intertidal zone is a narrow band where the ocean meets land. Organisms must adapt to daily changes in tide and wave action. The intertidal zone is further divided into vertical zones. So these would be organisms that live part of the time in the water and part of the time out of it, based on where the low tide is and where the high tide is. The tide varies based upon what time of the month it is. Tides are controlled by the moon. The moon exerts a gravitational force on the earth, and it pulls water toward it based upon what part of the moon cycle we are in. So the tides are higher whenever the moon is full because it is exerting a greater force of gravity upon the water. Open ocean ecosystems. The open ocean is divided into 3 zones: pelagic, abysmal, and benthic. The pelagic zone is further divided into 2 zones. The photic zone is shallow enough that sunlight is able to penetrate it. The word photic, photo, light. So this is where light can get through. The aphotic zone, A means without, photic means light. So this is the region that there's not sunlight. So aphotic zone is an area that sunlight is unable to penetrate. The benthic zone is along the ocean floor. In shallow areas, the benthic zone receives sunlight. As depth increases, light and temperature decrease as well. The deepest region of the ocean is called the abysmal zone. The water is very cold, and there is absolutely no light penetration. Organisms depend on food material that sink from the surface. So they wait for organisms up above them in the water to die, and then it just slowly sinks to the bottom, where they are then consumed by organisms living in the abysmal zone. Coastal ocean and coral reefs. Coral reefs are one of the most diverse ecosystems on Earth. They are widely distributed in warm, shallow marine waters, so in saltwater areas that are shallow. So here are the essential questions. Hopefully you can answer them by now. And the vocabulary terms. If you haven't completed them, please do so now. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or ask me in class tomorrow.